Thank you everyone for joining me today, and I'm blessed to have as my guest John Zmirak. He is a senior editor at thestream.org and author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Catholicism and several other books on apologetics. Thank you, John, for joining me today.
Thank you, Joseph. It's an honor to be on with you. I follow your writing and your apostolate very closely, and I think you have more courage and long-suffering and faithfulness that we need among our bishops. We need a lot more bishops like you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. You write a lot about, well, you write about a lot of current topics: Catholicism, politics, social problems. But I wanted to talk to you, first of all, about an article that you wrote a while back. And I was just doing a Google search on different things that you had written. And this one came up and I had never read it before. It's called My Father's Last Father's Day. And I will post the link at stream.org, and I'll post it when I edit this video. It's really in honor of your dad, who passed away in 2005, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it resonated with me so strongly. Not that many things have hit me so close to my own heart as this article. I lost my dad in 2017. My house had burned down in the 2017 fires here in California, and then my dad was in a wheelchair at that. It's a long story. My dad was in a wheelchair at that time, and then he was hospitalized and he passed away about 2 months later. And I think my whole life I've really been interested in the issue of fatherhood, fatherlessness, and specifically how those two things relate to male homosexuality. That's why I call this series of interviews I'm doing Finding Our Father. And it was just so beautiful. Right in the first sentence, you wrote about your dad's passing, and you wrote, "A dad-shaped hole that nothing will ever fill." That's what your dad's death left you with. I thought that was such a beautiful expression, a dad-shaped hole.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in America's prisons and in the street riots, and as you point out, in the gay bars and the bathhouses and the media, we're seeing a generation of fatherless boys turning into fatherless men, fathering another generation and not being fathers to them. And what we're facing is a horrendous social experiment. Can the West, can America get out from under the biological model that the human species has operated since its creation by God, of fathers raising sons and daughters and protecting them and preparing them and forming them for adulthood? Or can we let adults be hedonists and continue to be arrested adolescents and dabble and follow their bliss and tinker and sort of drop their baby batter here and there and just sort of let's see what happens on the grill? And can the federal government, with money, fill that dad-shaped hole? Can the federal government fill the hole of the fatherhood of God? Once we take God out of the equation, can talk of human rights, can talk of human dignity on the lips of Darwinian materialist atheists, can that replace Christianity and the biological role and social role of the father? And the answer is clear in the burning courthouses of Portland and in the packed prison cells of America. The anguish of Black America and poor white America is real. It's not a myth. But blaming systemic racism or capitalism for it, that's a lie. That's the big lie. The sexual revolutionaries are using racism and capitalism as surrogates, as scapegoats, to explain this devastating damage that their own libertine sexual ideologies, which ultimately derive from the Marquis de Sade and Margaret Sanger and Hugh Hefner and a long list of other disgusting perverts among elites. They're blaming racism. How long can they blame the Ku Klux Klan, which has like 300 beer-bellied rednecks somewhere in the South? How long can they blame them for fatherless black teens in Seattle going to prison? Well, we're about to see in this presidential campaign how long that blame can continue to be misapplied.
Yeah, that dad-shaped hole that you described, I'm gonna always give you proper approbation for that. It's such a great term. I think it's also evidenced in Grindr, the San Francisco Bay bathhouses, and in gay bars. It's just, I've seen it so many times. And
well, I would love you to speak to that. To what degree are things that we recognize as sinful, that we might firstly find gross, to what degree are they perversions of a desire for something good? I think it's always interesting to analyze sin and evil from the point of view of a lesser good or a distorted good.
Well, homosexuality, I don't want to talk about myself too much because I want to hear you. But I mean, homosexuality is, in essence, I mean, I came out like the worst possible time, which was 1988. It was not cool to be a gay guy at that time, let me tell you. I mean, that was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and people did not want to shake the hand of a gay man. So, but you know, I felt it was something that I needed to do in solidarity with those who had passed on, you know, because of the virus. But I also just was tired of being lonely and being picked on and being isolated. So, you know, it wasn't a long trip for me. I only live about an hour from San Francisco or less. So, you know, I didn't go there wanting particularly maybe a lot of sex or a lot of partying or drugs. I certainly didn't want AIDS, but you know, I just felt like I had no other choice. And I think the drawbacks I think are, I mean, they're still present today for somebody coming out, but they're still there. They're maybe not as publicized, but you know, I think the same draw is what takes people there. And it's a I mean, I don't want to say it over and over again, but it is a dad-shaped hole. I think a lot of it has to do with a bad father-son relationship. So not 100% of the time, but I think the majority.
There's a fascinating book by the Dutch Catholic psychiatrist Gerard van den Aardwijk.
Yeah.
I think it's called The Battle for Normality.
Yeah.
And he talks about the hundreds of gay male patients he dealt with who were dissatisfied with their sexual orientation. They felt it had been foisted on them. And I found the story he told very, very touching, very painful, that young men who are maybe not as overtly aggressive and masculine as their peers.
Yeah, here. Yeah.
Are kind of shunned by the other boys and adopted by the girls. And they begin to sort of identify with them, and they start to almost label themselves. But according to Van den Aardwijk, if they establish a healthy male friendship and sort of find a mentor, they can escape that and they can develop normally. Well, that's what happened to me.
And I want to get into.
I had a nice, good-hearted best friend named Anthony. We're still best friends today. We met at age 7, and we still Skype every single week.
And you had a good father. I mean, I didn't know your dad. I'm sure he wasn't perfect, but he certainly wasn't an SOB.
He was good enough. He was good enough. And like, he was clearly disappointed that I was not good at baseball. He was an umpire in the Little League, and he finally had a son. He'd had 2 daughters. He finally had a son he could bring to baseball, and I was terrible at it. My mother was overprotective and said, "Don't get hit by the ball, don't get hit by the ball." So I was terrified of the ball. I had bad vision, nobody knew it. I didn't have glasses. I was smaller than all the other kids because I was born in December, but I was still playing with the kids born in January. So my first year I hated every minute of it. He made me play for 5 solid years. I never got a hit. In my last game, I got hit by a pitch with the bases loaded and finally scored a run. It was not good, okay? But that was about the extent of him trying to sort of shoehorn me into being different than I was. Once he realized, oh, I got a little smarty pants here, but he's kind of a bookworm, he started bringing home books for me from the post office. Stuff he took from the dead letter office. He eventually got in trouble for that. But he would bring home like encyclopedia volumes and books for me, and he was excited to see me rip open the book and start reading it and spouting it back to him. So he learned to take pride in what I was naturally good at, which was, knocking out of the park on standardized tests in school and devouring books and being smarter than the teacher and being, kind of irritatingly precocious. But I could tell he was kind of proud of it. And when the first member of my family to go to college, when I got accepted to Yale, that obviously really meant something to him. So
I bet.
Even though I wasn't the kid who would help him fix cars, and I was not going to be a baseball star, I made him proud in other ways. And so I felt enough affirmation amidst the differences between us. Because, he was a blue-collar guy, grew up in Hell's Kitchen in the Depression, turned down the GI, went to World War II, served under General Patton in Germany, then came back and turned down the GI Bill to get a job at the post office. This was not an ambitious man.
Well, you got ahead of me. Your father and my father were a lot alike. Now, see, this is the difference between, I think, a proficient writer like me and a great writer like you. Because I think you said in 3 pages what I tried to do in like 300 pages of my. I know. I read this and I was like, oh, darn it. Okay, but this is beautiful what you write here. You wrote, "They say that a father's example is decisive in most men's lives, and this is nowhere more true than in the spiritual life." That's really beautiful, because my father was not educated. He's an immigrant. So I'm first generation, and he grew up during World War II in Sicily. So very, very, very little education, maybe the equivalent of like the 2nd grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So my dad he certainly wasn't a dumb man, because my dad was, like yours, was blue collar, but very adept with his hands, very mechanical, which I was not. My dad grew up in a very agricultural environment in Sicily. So he moved here to California because I've been to Sicily, and they look a lot alike. And it's very agricultural here. So he could fix tractors and figure out all kinds of things very, very easily. And I could not. I couldn't put together the Tinker Toys or the Lincoln Logs.
Yeah.
So, but my dad, again, I got off track. But my dad wasn't an educated man in things of the world or in the faith, but he had, I would say, he had more knowledge of Catholicism than I did after 12 years of parochial school in the 1970s.
I can say the same thing. I can say the same. My mother is a great example. My mother never forgave the Chinese for Pearl Harbor. The Chinese. She wouldn't park the car in Chinatown because I couldn't convince her there was any difference between the Japanese and the Chinese. It didn't matter to her. But she understood the faith because she had studied under the nuns in the 1930s. So she refused to do communion in the hand, and when she was outraged by all the changes in the church. And when we had heretical nuns at my high school, and I confronted them over what they were teaching us, that Mary wasn't a virgin, Jesus didn't rise from the dead. My mother marched up there, confronted the nuns, said, "Look at you with your hanging earrings and your lipstick, saying the Blessed Virgin wasn't a virgin. What are you? You're not a nun. You're not a woman. You don't know what you are."
Oh dear.
Wow. So she had the sensus fidelium, but she wouldn't forgive the Chinese for Pearl Harbor. So what we've done now is we've created a generation of educated ignoramuses.
Yeah.
Catholic schools serve an important purpose in my experience. They're a great place not to get stabbed. Okay. In New York City, if you go to public school, it means your parents don't care if you get stabbed, because Catholic schools were cheap enough and we went almost free because we were broke. So if you were at a Catholic school, you're not going to get stabbed. You're not going to learn the faith, but you won't get stabbed. So unfortunately, that's what they are for a lot of people, just a non-stabbing place.
I have advised, off the topic, I have advised people when they've asked me not to send their kids to Catholic schools, because at least in public schools, they won't learn the faith, but they won't learn like a perverted version of Christianity and Catholicism like they do in the Catholic. Like I learned liberation theology and.
Oh yeah, they showed us Sandinista propaganda films.
Oh, I got that too. Wow, we must be like the same age. Okay.
Yeah, I'm 56. I reported them to the principal and then the bishop and then the papal nuncio. They threatened to throw me out of school, but my mother had a lawyer she knew from playing poker at the high stakes illegal poker games that the Diocese of Brooklyn ran at the time, making millions of dollars for the church illegally. So she knew a Catholic lawyer from the poker games, and he was a conservative, and he offered to represent me. So the school backed off because they didn't want to get sued. I didn't fix anything at the school, but my Yale interviewer thought this was all really impressive and helped me get in. That's my story.
Back to my dad real quick. My dad had, no. My dad had a very sort of old-fashioned, sort of parochial, not parochial, sort of
peasant.
Well, I don't want to say peasant either, but
I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just
no. It was a very simple kind of piety that he had, and it was very strange to me growing up in the '70s Catholic Church when the altars were all being stripped, because my dad had the statues of the Pietà in the house and icons of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, which I didn't understand. So he had that, and the rosary. When I graduated from the 12th grade in Catholic school, I had no idea how to pray the rosary at all. I mean, I knew vaguely what it was. It was what Madonna wore around her neck, But that was about it. So my dad prayed the rosary and novenas and all those very old-fashioned kind of things that I observed him, but I thought they were quite antiquated and ridiculous.
I said in the article, having a father practice the faith is very important for boys. Both my sisters married non-believers, and they kept going to mass, but their husbands didn't. Wouldn't you know, none of their sons are Catholic, but their daughters are.
Wow.
My father took me to the Holy Name Society Mass every month and the Holy Name Society meeting, and I saw him go to Mass every single week. And as a result, I never missed Mass a single week my entire life, unless I was sick, until this damn coronavirus when they canceled the Masses. And it's kind of painful to me to have Mass go away, but my dad's example in that was a really important thing. Also his example of a work ethic, of being self-sacrificing, of constantly, every morning getting up at 5 o'clock, going to carry mail on his back. They didn't have carts. Mail on his back like a mule, and he was built like a bear. You couldn't massage his shoulders because they were like cement blocks. He once gave a woman the Heimlich maneuver and inadvertently broke 2 of her ribs because he was that strong. It was like
my dad.
Yeah, like a tame bear in the house.
Yep. Now you grew up in New York City.
Astoria, Queens. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's where my aunt was there. God rest her soul. But what I've noticed too in New York is, I think it was different here in California in the '70s, where it went, full on, weird, 3-ring circus masses. Whereas my experience, especially in New York City, where you have more ethnic parishes, it seemed like they held on more to the tradition. And I see it here in California with the Mexicans, and because, God willing, they'll hold on to these traditions that they brought with them from Mexico, with Our Lady of Guadalupe and all of those things.
Yeah,
I didn't see that at all as a kid. It was all the St. Louis Jesuits. It was all guitar.
Oh man,
it was all that.
Molested in the church. They introduced a folk mass which they would hold in our grammar school lunchroom with felt banners and guitars and all that crap. And I remember hearing Blowing in the Wind. Where have all the flowers gone? And I remember as a curious kid looking at the name of the composer, B. Dylan. I don't know, maybe some second-rate church composer. And we'd be singing this gibberish, and it made no sense to me, so I thought it must be from the Old Testament, like all those puzzling psalms. Oh, all this stuff we're singing, it makes no sense to me. It must be Old Testament. No, in fact, it was just flower children's song. But I hated the folk mass. At age 7 and 8, I was sneaking out of folk mass to go to what I called the real mass up in the real church, where you had to kneel and be silent at the consecration. I'll never forget my mother telling me why I had to kneel and be silent when they rang the bells. She said, "You see that piece of bread up there?" I said, "It doesn't look like bread." "Well, it is, and now it's going to become God. It doesn't look like God. Well, it is. And that sank into me on a profound level, to the point where, and I think this is an actual grace, I've gone into churches and felt, man, something weird. Something's missing. And I would look up, and the tabernacle was empty because they were cleaning it. And I hadn't seen that. I could sense it. I can tangibly feel the presence or absence of the Blessed Sacrament. That's an actual grace, but it's the kind of thing you build up in a child through good teaching.
I'd never experienced that. And you see, I was born in '69. So when I had my first communion, it was right at the flip where they went to communion in the hand. And at that time, it wasn't presented as an option. They just said, well, this is the way you do it.
Oh, they always said, this is what the Pope wants. The Pope wants face-to-face confession. The Pope wants communion in the hand. The Pope wants the Diocese of Brooklyn to grant 100% of the annulments, which he did. We had a perfect record. He never turned down an annulment.
Wow, okay.
So, I mean, yeah, you and I went through the same devastation. We saw the Mongols ride through, burning everything in sight, and say, but at least the Mongols didn't say, this is renewal. This is a new springtime. Welcome, look at the glorious renewal and regeneration of the new Pentecost. No, the Mongols just burned things and admitted they were burning them. We had the indignity of these sappy loser mediocrities who ended up in the clergy somehow, telling us that the Pope wanted this and this was the Holy Spirit at work. It would have been, if we believed them, you would have thought the Holy Spirit was a quite dangerous thing.
At least you hung on to the faith. I dumped it very young at about 15 or 16. When if my mom and dad told me to go to Mass, I just was like, no, that was it. It didn't go anymore.
God works differently in different people. I think in my case, it was Irish stubbornness. Like, I'm not going to admit I was wrong about something this important for this long. No way. So even God works through our natures. And in my case, it was my mother's family's Irish. It was donkey Irish stubbornness. No, I don't care. But for a brief period, my heretical religion teacher started to get under my skin. When he said, this is not a sin, that's not a sin, that's not a sin, that's not a sin, I'm like, well, this is sounding good. Because at like age 12 or 13, I had gone and started reading the 1907 Catholic Encyclopedia at the public library. And that'll make you kind of a scrupulous teenager, I tell you. As a 12-year-old reading the 1907 Catholic Encyclopedia on sexual sins, I mean, I was pretty sure I was hellbound. And here's this bearded ex-seminarian telling me, oh, that's not a sin, that's not a sin, nothing's a sin. For about 6 months, it sounded pretty good. But then he denied transubstantiation.
Wow.
He denied that Christ is literally physically present in the Eucharist. And something clicked in my head. I said, oh, he might just be evil. Oh, he's just evil. That's what it is. He's just evil. So then when he's denied the physical resurrection of Christ, the infallibility of the Pope, the virginity of Mary, I realized, oh, they're just evil. They're on the side of Satan. I remember seeing the Omen. These people are on the side of Satan. Now it all makes sense.
I was taught something, I think they termed it consubstantiation?
Consubstantiation. How nice of them to borrow from Martin Luther. Martin Luther's considerably more orthodox than these people. At least he says Jesus is also there along with the bread. They think he's just a symbol or fart in the bathtub or something.
Part of it too was, I'm getting off track. Part of it too was that they said that the congregation or the faithful needed to be there in order for transubstantiation to take place.
That's absolute nonsense, but okay.
So I mean, that's why they started the thing with everybody coming up to the altar during the consecration.
Wait, they did that in your parish? I would have left.
We did that. Yeah, we used to link hands around.
Oh God, that is
with the
so disgusting. That is so bad. That combines cheesiness with forced intimacy, with being close up to other greasy New Yorkers. No, God, no. Oh, so bad. So
it was awful.
Any good person should be repulsed by that. That is like the devil trying to drive everybody but the idiots out of the church.
One of the things you brought up too in your article was really important is when your dad took you to Mass and took you to this. It was like a sodality. The Holy Name Society. Okay.
Holy Name Society. It still exists in a lot of parishes. It was an all-male organization devoted to developing honor for the holy name of God, holy name of Jesus, and to countering blasphemy and profanity among men.
Right.
And its counterpart was the Rosary Society, which was for the women. Of course, a few years back in my parish, the brilliant pastor combined them. So
that wasn't a good idea.
So all the old men have to sit with all the old women. No escape. There's no same-sex friendship. It's as if we're supposed to forget everything we know about human nature and everything we know about reality, about economics, about anything, because now we're in the church and everything's magic, and unicorns will poop rainbows from the sky because we are church. It's just the embrace of idiocy is enabled by a theological veneer.
You wrote, this was an all-male affair to which the grocers, barbers, and other men in our working-class neighborhood dressed up in suits in honor of the mystery that drove them to their knees. Beautiful. This is interesting, too, because I think, I was left behind from that. The only time I had an inkling of this, and I write it in my book, is like if my dad took me to the barber, or my dad was, he had a friend who was a welder. So he took me to the welder shop or like the mechanics. That was really like the only all-male environment that I ever had, and I loved it. But I was repulsed by it at the same time and kind of scared of it. And the only place, when I came out in the late 80s that I could find an all-male environment was in the gay male community.
Oh, that's hard.
That was it. Certainly wasn't in church.
Yeah, sorry.
So, and it's weird because, if you look at the Village People, but, they try to mimic those sort of working class stereotypes.
Right.
Because a lot of the bars or sex clubs or something look like a mechanic shop, or it's quite strange. They have this.
That my immediate reaction to that is to get skeeved out, but I have to realize that is broken people.
I loved it.
Sinners like me looking for what they were denied at a formative age. And so there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it.
So
it meant the world to me to be around other men, because I had never been around them my whole life. My dad was a good man. He did the best he could, but he wasn't around. My dad worked like a dog, and he just was not around. I think
we see there a genuine criticism we can raise about modern capitalism, which is an amazing thing. It has freed hundreds of millions of people from grinding poverty. It's the best economic system.
But it's taken the dad out of the home.
But it takes dad away. Dad is not around. You're raised by mom, or you're raised by nannies, or you're raised by the TV set. And
now men are maybe not so blue collar, but if they're white collar, especially here in the Bay Area, because people cannot afford to live in the inner Bay Area, San Francisco or Oakland, or God forbid, San Jose. So they're living out, where I live in the suburbs. So they're commuting like 4 hours a day.
Oh,
and
awesome.
You think if dad is living with his kids, when he gets home, he's dead tired.
Yeah.
He just wants to plop in front of the TV, watch a little football, have a drink, go to bed, and the next day do it all over again.
That was kind of my dad too. He would get home at 4 o'clock and watch the 4:30 movie.
That's fairly early, though. Yeah.
Because he got up at 5:30 and went to work at 6. So he'd be home. There was a whole class of people like that. Guys who went to work at sunrise, who were back by 4 o'clock.
But
they had
the
4:30 movie.
Yeah. It sounds like you had quality time with your dad.
On weekends, especially on Saturday morning, he would get up and make breakfast, and he would make breakfast on Saturdays, and he'd be there making pancakes or French toast, blasting Luciano Pavarotti, and trying to sing along in nonsense Italian syllables, trying to sing along with Pavarotti and making French toast and pancakes. And I treasured those Saturdays and those Sunday afternoon dinners and stuff.
My dad would play Mario Lanza.
Mario Lanza's great. Yeah, my dad had thousands of records, and I remember his copy of Man of La Mancha. I would play it, and I learned to sing along. I could sing that whole album from memory, because he had all these great old records from the 30s and 40s and 50s. And the thing is, a good enough dad, a good enough male mentor, And as Van den Aardwijk said in his book, tragically, too often that male mentor turns out to be a predator.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And a lot of young, vulnerable men are preyed on by slightly older homosexuals, and then they label themselves. And they're like, well, I guess this is me for life. I've done this once, I'm tainted for life. And that's why I was so outraged.
I'm gonna get into that with you.
Okay, all right.
Can you hold it?
Sure. I can wait.
One of the things you wrote too is you wrote, he and my mother found me a little puzzling. That was my mom and dad's, I think, estimation or of me as well. When I was reading this, and I don't mean this as any kind of offense to you, but when I was reading this, I was saying, well, the ingredients for the recipe are here for a gay guy.
I know. That's why I am so sympathetic to ex-gay people, guys who have come out of that lifestyle. I see there, but for the grace of God, go I. I had a lot of the ingredients to be exploited. Thank God I wasn't. But
you know what was the difference? Your father.
Yeah.
Your father, because you had a good dad. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I had a bad dad. I just think that me and my dad were a bad fit.
Yeah.
We were really very, very, very different. And my dad just couldn't relate to me, and he tried. But then, yeah, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. But yeah, what's your story? It just shows you how important a father is, because you were, I'd say, a little boy that maybe we could say was pre-homosexual.
I think as Mother Teresa said, anyone is capable of any sin.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't find it in my heart to be judgmental of people.
Thank you.
Who sin out of weakness, who are exploited, who are brainwashed or coerced into things. I am outraged by people who endorse that exploitation and try to systematize it, turn it into an ideology and a lifelong trap.
Yeah. Thank goodness you didn't go into the priesthood.
Oh, I wouldn't have been able to stand it. I hated even being an altar boy. I hated being up there. I knew I didn't belong there. I was clumsy. I knocked things over. And the idea of living in a house with a bunch of old Irishmen and no wife just repulsed me completely.
John, that's interesting, because I loved being an altar boy. I was in a strange sort of period of time right before they flipped and they invited the girls, and I did not want to be an altar boy. I'm like, no, because I was already hanging out with the girls. I didn't even speak to a boy very often. Wow. But our very rough, tough Irish pastor at my parish, he was like, 5'6", 95 pounds. But boy, he had that air of masculinity about him that didn't necessarily fit with his physical bearing. And he was so good to me. And I'd never really had an example of a man who was caring, but also very strong and very disciplined, and sort of expected that from you. And then my life kind of changed at that time. I was getting along with the boys a little better, because in Catholic grammar school, I never had a female teacher. It was a male. It was all female.
Oh, wow.
So it was different being under the guidance of a man, but then it ended because they started having female Eucharist ministers, and we were all kicked out of the sacristy, and it was over. And
the whole point of altar girls was to get rid of altar boys, to dry up the source of priestly vocations, so that we'll have to ordain these harridans, these women who want to be priests, even though they don't really believe in the priesthood of the Eucharist or even a transcendent God. It's just an act of vandalism, and it's horrendous. That was the single dumbest thing John Paul II did. He did a lot of good things, but altar girls, yes, the Assisi meeting was a scandal and it was stupid, but altar girls and appointing bishops like McCarrick, just listening to bad advice from Americans telling him who to appoint, it's a very mixed legacy. I'm gratefully brought down communism, but the church,
I agree.
We never got the restoration of the church that we had been promised.
I agree. And one last thing about your father, what you wrote, this is really beautiful too. You wrote, his talents went underdeveloped and his rough edges never got smoothed, but Dad was always there. You could always trust him. Every day, healthy or sick, he went to work. Every Sunday, he was kneeling at Mass and as an example for me. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, I realized I had taken that for granted, you know. And when he passed away, I mean, I was in the room. I was sitting in the room in the hospice. I remember him looking up at the sky and then ceasing to breathe. And it's a moment I'll never forget. But I feel like I still have him in the things that I learned from him. You know, I've got a work ethic. I like to take care of people if they need it, maybe sometimes too much. I'm kind of an enabler. But I have the habit of going to Mass. I have a healthy understanding of God as a father. You know, so in a sense, I'm carrying on the most important pieces of him.
Beautiful.
Even if I've gotten rid of his Astoria accent.
Yeah, my John. Back to John Paul. John Paul wrote a beautiful little remembrance of his father coming, and it's weird because it was so similar to a memory that I had of my dad. But this is when I came back to the faith after being gay and all that, and I would see my dad praying late into the night, usually praying the rosary. My dad would do like 4 when they added the Luminous. He would do all 4 mysteries of the rosary. Yeah, every single day. Usually for me when I was out being a slut in San Francisco. But when I came home and I saw my dad praying, it meant so much to me that he was praying for me. And John Paul II, I remember as a young boy, after his mother had passed away and he was living alone with his father and the brother had died. And he saw his dad praying late into the night and how important that was as an example of a father being a pious and holy, because we don't growing up in the new church, the Novus Ordo church in the 70s, I rarely saw men in church and rarely saw men having outward signs of piety. I didn't see that until I was later left gay and started going to the traditional Latin Mass, and then I saw men.
Let me point out something.
I saw men who were pious.
Right. I wrote a piece back in like 2002 about Rembert Weekland, when Rembert Weekland was finally outed as having used church money to fund his lover's video career. Rembert Weekland was the architect of the new Mass. I mean, he, in private, helped plan it out. He demonstrated it for Paul VI. And in that piece I wrote, I don't agree with traditionalists who say that the new Mass was created to make Protestants more comfortable. I think it was created to make gay priests more comfortable. Because if you look at the activity of the priest in the old rite, in any traditional rite, it's intensely formal and ritualized and masculine and depersonalized. Nobody's looking at him. He's not a diva. He's not Liberace playing a crescendo. He is a machine. He is operating. He's a part in a machine that's designed to operate. A machine built by saints that can be operated by anyone. The Novus Ordo is a machine built by idiots that saints can, if they really try, celebrate reverently.
Yeah.
So I think
it helps if they're ad orientem.
Oh, of course. I'm taking that for granted. Having the priest face the audience encourages him to be a juggler or a comedian or a magician. He should be a cog in the wheel in persona Christi. Also remember, the priest is meant to symbolize Christ as the bridegroom, and the congregation is the church as his bride. That understanding of the mystical conjugal nature of the sacrament is almost completely obliterated in your average parish, where we're all in a circle and the priest basically sits around while laymen do everything until he's wheeled out to zap the cookie and then sits back down.
Lay women.
Yeah, almost, yeah, lay women, yeah, it's a mixture. But I mean, the point is the priest is reduced to
Token, yeah.
the absolute bare minimum. We still need the priest to do the consecration, but otherwise, let's shove him aside. And at my parish here in Dallas, it really frustrates me. I probably need to find a new parish.
Oh.
The pastor, after the consecration, sits down and lets the layman distribute the Eucharist. Like he's the executive chef and he's tired, and the waiters have to bring the plates out to the diners in the dining room.
Well, you guys have the Fraternity of St. Peter in Dallas, so.
Yeah, we do. You know what? I like the traditional mass. I don't like hanging out with trads. I spent the 90s hanging out with trads, with like all these guys who signed up to join the Fraternity of St. Peter, and they were all sent home because it all turned out they were all gay. My experience of the traditional mass is I'm glad it exists. I wish it were universal so that it was not such a self-selecting group of activists, eccentrics, and great pious people all mixed together. I never want to go to another coffee hour and have somebody hand me a bullet on why the Holocaust never happened.
Yeah, I don't do that. No. See, I don't do that. See, I know because I dealt with that. Is I go to mass and I leave.
Yeah,
that's it. I don't even chit chat with the priest. I just whoop.
Head for the parking lot. That's good. Yeah, mass is ended. Go run for your car. I even do that at my regular parish.
Here's my segue to the church. Real quick. I'm going to talk to you for a long time. I want to talk to you about the church a little bit, and I think because there's been a failure of fatherhood, I think we've just seen a failure in the priesthood, because a lot of men who become priests didn't have good dads, and they don't know how to be a father.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to do it. So I think a lot of times they just let the women take charge.
Right.
I think if they had been dads and fathers, they probably would have done the same thing, and moms would have been just a soccer mom or whatever. Or
Karen.
The
church is entirely run. Every church should be named St. Karen, because the whole church is run by Karens, by these insufferable middle-aged harridans in their Sears and Roebuck's clothes, who get this commanding tone of voice, and, well, I'll talk to Father Monsignor about it, and you know he's going to rubber stamp whatever they say just to get their lips to stop moving so he doesn't have to hear the noises coming out of their heads. I mean, I think a lot of the push for women's ordination is women who are offended that for 15 minutes every Sunday a man gets to talk without being interrupted. And they want to put a stop to that. No more sermons. No, I mean, yeah. Our society, while it's still run by a bunch of white guys, but they don't have any of the old male virtues. I mean, look at the difference between George H.W. Bush, who had his problems, and W. Bush. Okay, there you see the collapse of the American elites from kind of stern, puritanical, responsible, maybe cynical and a little bit conniving, but basically having civic mindedness, having a notion of leaving behind a legacy, and their frat boy sons who just want to have fun and party.
Yeah. Well, not to get on a tangent, but George W. Bush just did not have a good relationship with his dad. It was it was strained. It was awful at times. So
if I were George H.W. Bush and my son turned out like W, I think I would be pretty disappointed too.
So I mean,
but then what did he do? Why did that happen? He was probably too busy off, negotiating oil deals and getting obscenely rich, and wasn't around his son. I live near Highland Park. Beautiful homes. The guys work 80-hour weeks. I don't know if they ever see their kids.
Yeah. So this was your 2018 wish list. This was really interesting. So you wrote this at the beginning of the year. And this was before that bad
2 years ago, 2018.
Yeah, this was before that bad year of 2018. This was just at the beginning of the year. You wrote, in the best case scenario, Pope Francis will see the error of his ways and spend the rest of his pontificate undoing the damage he's wrought. Failing that, he should imitate the example of Pope Benedict and admit that he can no longer lead the church. You wrote that at the beginning of 2018. So did you write that mainly because of Memoris Laetitia? Because that was before the whole Vigano and McCarrick thing, which I want to get into.
And that was before he negotiated an alliance with China against the West, reminiscent of the Hitler-Stalin Pact in 1939.
Yeah.
That was before a lot of things. And that was before, I think that was before, this to me was the single worst thing of this pontificate.
The China issue?
No, I'm about to say what the worst thing is. It's much more intimate and small, but significant. The young man who was sexually molested down in South America.
I want to get into you with that.
Yeah. That to me is the heart of the pontificate.
I agree. You wrote about it. This is what you wrote. And this is an article, this was an op-ed you did from, correct me, John, Rorate Chaley.
Right.
I'll link it. This is about Pope Francis. You wrote, the Pope lives in a house managed by a priest who consorted with male prostitutes. Francis was backed for the papacy by molester Cardinal McCarrick and cover-up artist Cardinals Daniels and Whirl. He plunked Daniels from disgrace under Pope Benedict, inviting Daniels to join him when he first addressed Roman crowds and asking him to speak at the Synod on the Family to the bishops of the world. And this is what I want to talk to you about. You wrote, Francis defied cries of victims and elevated a bishop in Chile who'd actively covered for a molester. When the Pope's mockery of the victims blew up in the press, he blamed the local bishops and called one victim to Rome. Then he told the young man that God, not the priest who molested him, had made him gay. John, that was kind of my story too.
I wonder how many people's stories it is.
Unfortunately, it's all anecdotal evidence, but I heard this was not an unusual story from people. So, I mean, I was groomed by a Catholic priest who kept feeding me that line that God had made me gay. And, and then he molested me. And then, so
a church full of homosexual Jeffrey Epsteins. Victimizing teen boys and telling them that God made them gay. No, you made them gay by imprinting their still amorphous sexuality at a formative age. And I've read countless stories of abuse victims. How many of them end up becoming male prostitutes, drug addicts, suicidal, just ruined by these reckless, depraved men. There are not enough millstones to hang around their necks.
So, I mean, I was not a big fan of Pope Francis. I quite liked Pope Benedict. But he lost me when he had that with Juan Carlos Cruz, because I had heard some interviews that Juan Carlos Cruz had done, and I
don't know the story.
Oh, he was the young guy that was molested by that priest in South America, and I found him to be really credible, really sincere, not at all like an LGBT advocate or anything, just wanting his story to be told, wanting justice. I was really super impressed with him. I thought he's like one of the bravest people in the Catholic Church. Yeah. And then like everything, it seems like with Pope Francis, it sort of comes out in drips and drabs, and then you hear about it, and then you don't hear anything else. And then Juan Carlos Cruz had this meeting with Pope Francis, and he came out immediately almost and said, well, this is what the Pope said. Right. The Pope said this, that God made me gay, not to worry about it, yada, yada, yada. And then James Martin, of course, jumped on it right away and said, see, I've been telling people, for years that God made them this way and all this stuff. And now the Pope says it. And of course, there's never any sort of correction or elaboration or anything from the Vatican at all. And I have no reason to doubt what Juan Carlos Cruz said that the Pope said. Right. Because I don't think from the beginning, I don't think he has any ulterior motive in any of this. And when I heard that the Pope had said that, I said, he lost me because he is speaking like my abuser. And
when you have a Pope endorsing as the will of God the moral and psychological devastation inflicted on a helpless young man by a predator molester priest. That is the spirit and the voice of Antichrist. That is the most evil thing I've ever heard. Ian Paisley of the Orange Order in Northern Ireland never accused the Catholic Church of being this bad. This is like a Jack Chick tract that you found on your car outside of a church. It's like I wrote a column, is Jack Chick running the Catholic Church from beyond the grave? I tell you, I'm hanging, sometimes I feel like I'm hanging on to my faith by my fingernails. You know, they're doing everything they can to make the church as repulsive as possible to people of any intellectual integrity, of any sense of shame, of any sense of integrity. They're trying to make it authentically shameful to be Catholic, not shameful like in Elizabethan England where the church is being persecuted and you're embarrassed and you're weak and it's embarrassing because the government's against you. They're trying to make it authentically disgraceful to the point where when I hear people are converting to Catholicism today, God help me, the first thing that goes through my head is why? Why? God, why? Really? Really? All right. Welcome to the Titanic. The shuffleboard is down there. The band is still playing tunes from La Cage aux Folles, so you might want to listen to the band. But
I am what
boys
I am.
in the band are not very happy.
Yeah, I am what I am. So yeah, that affected me very deeply. I mean, last year I actually stopped going to mass. I did not want to hear Pope Francis's name in the canon of the mass. I just stopped going. And
When we're asked to pray for the Pope's intention, I pray for protection from him. I don't let myself pray for a meteorite, but I do pray for protection from him.
Oh.
And he has aligned himself with the Chinese Communist dictatorship. The official line of the Vatican, according to the highest official on Catholic social teaching, Bishop Sarando, is that Catholic social teaching is best practiced in communist China and much better than in the United States. That is the official position of the Vatican right now. 2 years after Sarando said it, it has still not been corrected. I'm not going to make excuses for that. I'm not going to try to explain that away.
Yeah, and McCarrick was instrumental in all of that too.
Yes, we sent our crack child molester to negotiate that agreement. He was the best child molester. He was the best pedophile available for the job.
Yeah, and let me tell you something about the Catholic Church too. They are still not self-regulating or policing themselves. If those victims of McCarrick had not come forward, they would still be flying McCarrick first class on Alitalia, back and forth.
Right now, they're just
from the Vatican.
Away from reporters, so the reporters can't find out his role in stealing $20 million from the layman of the Papal Foundation to bail out a mafia-connected Catholic hospital in Rome.
Yeah, nice.
And he knows where all the bodies are buried. I'm telling you, if a journalist gets anywhere near McCarrick, he's going to end up like Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. Something you wrote here in the stream. This was really, really interesting. You wrote, I once tried to explain the problem faced by faithful Catholics to my good friend Eric Metaxas. This is your quote. Imagine you felt your salvation depended on staying inside a church with apostolic doctrines, which is run by liberal Protestants. The problem that I face is that, imagine you felt your salvation, depended on staying in this church, but it's also run by pedophiles and perverts and
it's a
gay predators,
discouraging thing, and I've written
John, the world that I tried to get away from was not this bad.
I hear the same thing from Robert Oscar Lopez, a friend of mine who
he's a good
grew
guy.
up, great guy, grew up raised in liberation theology by a lesbian couple, his mom and her lover, went to Yale and fell under the spell of John Boswell, ended up being very active in the gay lifestyle, and then had a conversion experience and became a Baptist. And he really can't bring himself to go back to a church that strikes him as increasingly gay owned and operated. I don't know what the solution is. I wonder if there is any future for a celibate priesthood, because I think in past centuries, there were enough good, bad reasons to become a priest. Good, bad meaning it was better than working in a coal mine. It was better than being a dirt farmer. So you might be willing to do it. You might get psychologically normal men willing to give up marriage and having 11 kids, half of whom died, and willing to actually be celibate and repeat the doctrine that's in the books and celebrate the Mass faithfully. I think that was true in past centuries, and it's still true in developing world societies. I don't think you're going to get enough psychologically normal men to agree to be celibate in current conditions. So I'm open to a married priesthood just because the situation is so atrocious now.
Yeah.
But
I've been there. I almost converted to Orthodoxy, and a lot of it had to do with the married priests that I met. They were just so normal.
The best pastor I ever had was a Melkite Catholic priest who was married with kids. Best pastor I ever had, compared to these weird, conflicted, thinly veiled gay, or just psychologically weird, just like outcasts and flotsam and jetsam who washed up, and they were breathing, so someone ordained them because they needed somebody to be a priest.
These guys in Orthodoxy, they're not gay activists. They're just, I think that church is attractive to a lot of men who have some, whatever reason, attachment to Catholicism, but they're gay activists. So
yeah, that's a minus. I would call that a real minus in priest, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I would say that should be a red flag. Gay activists? No, probably not. No. When I look at the people affiliated with the Catholic left who work for Catholic charities and Catholic relief services, and some of the bishops and a lot of the priests, I just think, oh, this is where the dumb gays go. Ones who don't have any talent, they can't work on Broadway, they're not smart enough to work for the Democrats, so they become a priest and they can live in a palace like the Disney princess they always knew they really were.
I think you're right. I've met that type, unfortunately, a lot. I've kept you too long. I want to talk about Archbishop Vigano because I think he's a ray of light. You wrote this right after, when did you write this? In 2018, August 29th, 2018. I'll link this as well.
I write 5 columns a week, so.
And you wrote this right after Vigano's first letter. You wrote this: I was happy. After 5 years of gathering darkness and doubt, I saw a break in the clouds, a glimpse of the gold light of heaven. If men like Archbishop Vigano are still in the church, maybe I belong there too. That's exactly how I felt, John, too. When I read his letter, I was like, it was disturbing because a lot of what I had heard, believed, experienced was in black and white. But you know what? That week I talked with friends, and I honestly thought after that letter, it was such a bombshell that I thought there was going to be a major house cleaning within the church. I thought Francis was going to resign. I thought most of the cardinals and bishops in the United States were going to quit, and it didn't happen. Nothing.
No, because they don't. You assume that they have a sense of shame. These are men way past a sense of shame. I'll tell you the one thing that could fix things. If Donald Trump, God willing, gets reelected, and he has the Department of Justice start a RICO suit against the U.S. Catholic bishops for their shuffling of pedophiles from one state jurisdiction to another, if he were to investigate that, the church would lose all the nonprofit contracts that keep the money flowing in. Like 40% of the U.S. Catholic bishops' money comes from the U.S. government for them to do generic secular things that anybody else could do, like especially connected to immigration. And that's where the Catholic left gets all its money, that pays all its activists. The bishops can issue 250 policy statements a year, like they were a legitimate government in exile. All that goes away. The whole Catholic left starves to death on cat food if the Department of Justice does what it should and looks into the bishops shuffling and pedophiles.
John, I don't want to take too much of a deep dive because I'm not familiar with the legalities as you are.
Oh, no, I got this from a Capitol Hill guy.
Okay, but
he would lose eligibility to bid on federal contracts.
No, I know that, but wouldn't, if that was going to happen, wouldn't that require something like they did in Pennsylvania, where it would have to start like on the state level, where they'd have to do some? No,
it would be federal because they were bishops moving priests from one diocese to another across state lines. The FBI should be involved.
But do you think anybody would do that? Who would do that?
Well, I mean, we would need a Catholic congressman or a Catholic senator to go to the president and say, you would be helping Catholics. You would be helping the church. You would be handing the power back to the layman in the pew who gives checks to the bishops. You would be cleaning up the church. You'd be doing yourself a favor and cutting off a huge source of money to your political enemies. You'd be serving God. You'd be serving man. You'd be serving America.
But politicians, I think, what's the payback? Why would they do it? What's the benefit politically for them to do that?
Politically, he'd be cutting off the money to all these left-wing activists at Catholic Charities and Catholic Immigration Services and all the people who churn out the policy statements attacking him day in, day out on every issue except abortion.
But then they would really demonize that person, saying,
They can't demonize him any more than they already have. What are they going to do? Call him a racist again?
Yeah.
You're a double racist. You're on double secret probation. Now we really hit you. We're going to hit you with our purse. He has nothing left to lose. Look what Wilton Gregory did to Donald Trump. He lied. He lied and he attacked the Knights of Columbus and the John Paul II Shrine for hosting President Trump when he had been invited weeks before and Gregory had been invited and knew all about it. He pretended that Donald Trump was making a last-minute political stop at the John Paul II thing. And that was a lie. That's been proven to be a lie. John Allen reported that it was a lie.
But John, there's too many well-connected, like liberal Catholics, like Pelosi, Biden, Tim Kaine. I mean, they would never, ever.
They don't have any choice. They don't control the Department of Justice.
Okay.
That's the point of being president. That's the point. If you elect a president, he gets to do these things. Elections have consequences. The Department of Justice could do this tomorrow. It should be before the election, but after the election.
Yeah.
If we win.
Okay. It sounds awful, but I would love to see the bishops go down in a ball of flames.
The only way to make the church something other than a courtesan in an apartment at the Plaza Hotel cashing checks from the federal government is to take away the money. The only way to stop getting bishops who love money and power and rent boys is to take away the money, the power, and the rent boys. So that the only way we're going to get bishops like John Neumann, bishops like who's the bishop in New York, Dagger John Hughes. Those were men who became bishops when it was not appealing and fun and comfortable to be a bishop. It has to be, again, being a Catholic bishop has to be a tough job that nobody really wants before we get anybody worth having. Till then, we're going to get people like Cardinal Dolan, who show up to watch Madonna prancing around in a chasuble at the museum.
At the Met Gala. That's right.
That was the essence of the Catholic Church establishment. If you want to sum it up in one event, it's Cardinal Dolan chortling jovially with Mario Cuomo while Madonna prances around in a chasuble. If you want to sum up the Washington, D.C. establishment, it was the John McCain funeral with W. Bush holding hands with Michelle Obama. Those are the two swamps we face.
Right, but I want to kind of try to wrap this up because I've kept you too long. But you did write that how can Catholics fight back with the power of the purse? That was one of your articles, and I'll link that as well.
Yeah.
Because I think as long as Catholics are willing to put up with this nonsense and this disgusting sadistic behavior, it's going to continue. We are facilitating it.
Well, of course, now they've shown us they can live without Sunday collections. They can live without the laity altogether. They're just going to get PPP loans from the government. They're going to get their nonprofit contracts. During the coronavirus shutdown, we've seen that the church can get along fine if the laity all died. The bishops would just get their money from Uncle Sam. That has to change. We have to cut them off from the pig trough so they're actually dependent on our donations. As it is now, they're only partially dependent. They can just shake down the federal government, sneak some more immigrants into the country. Every time an immigrant gets here, the church cashes a check. We have to cut the church off from Caesar. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to be painful. Look, we're going to lose some beautiful old historic buildings, which is close to my heart. I hate the idea.
I would rather lose them than lose more souls, though.
Yeah, you're a better person than I am. I really care too much about architecture.
I know.
I really, really don't want to lose those beautiful old buildings. We got to get committees of laymen to buy them up and keep them as museums. And if a church ever arises again in America, maybe it can use them.
Yeah. I always try to end, a lot of my talks are kind of dark. I want to end this one on a hopeful note, because I think if more bishops, cardinals, priests were more like your dad, not perfect men, but selfless guys, I think
it's just
the
real
church,
guys.
yeah, the church would be in such self-sacrificing men. My dad, for all his faults, he was a very self-sacrificing man. He always forego himself and his needs for that of his family. And I wish that the bishops would do the same. I just wish they would do that. Not do what's easy for them or expedient or what's going to keep them solvent. Who cares if the diocese goes bankrupt? Just do what's right.
Yeah. And we saw in the sex abuse crisis how few of them were willing to do it. And the ones who did, they didn't get crushed by the sex abuse settlements. They have strong seminaries. It's going to be a time of pruning. We're going to see the church go from a forest to a little bonsai garden in our lifetime. And we're gonna have to be ready for it. It's not going to be a comfortable or a pleasant thing, but we need apostles like you keeping the flame alive, Joseph. God bless you and keep going.
God bless you, John. Thank you so much.